Hey there, comic book friends, I'm Travis, and this is another edition of No Capes, where I talk about comic books that I read that don't have superheroes in them, and Ethan doesn't read them or doesn't review them with me. First off, I am going to talk about Saga Chapter 7, the notorious book with the 60-foot scrotum. There is more to this book than just that. I'm still really enjoying this book. This issue is more of a setup issue for what's coming next. We do get some cool kind of background history of Marco and his parents, and you know, where they come from, what's their worldview of the war, and that sort of thing, to kind of explain why Marco's parents show up all gung-ho from the last issue, and we find out what they did with Isabel, the ghostly babysitter, and I think there's a lot of really good moments in this issue. I love the ending. The ending is really great, with Alana and her father-in-law having a conversation and kind of dealing with each other and what their opinion is of each other, and then the father-in-law casting a spell on her that seems to kind of put her to sleep, and her sudden panic that something bad was going to happen to Hazel as the father-in-law is checking out Hazel. The dialogue between Marco and his mother is fabulous. There's some really funny parts that have to do with the 60-foot scrotum. That part's pretty hilarious as far as that, just a funny situation and funny dialogue. The whole, talking about how they pretty much sold their house and whatnot so they could buy these magic helmets to track Marco down because they thought Marco was in trouble. All really interesting. I'm confused by this cover. The covers in the past have always had some indication of what's going on in the book and whatnot. And I know comic book covers are notorious for not having anything to do with anything, but here's Marco all covered in blood. Looks like he's killed some multi-winged bird or whatever, because there's feathers flying around and stuff, and he's all covered in gore. I'm not sure what's up with that. I mean, is he slaughtered an albatross? I mean, did Fiona just have some sketch of Marco laying around that she decided did they use as a cover? Kind of confused on that. No, still an outstanding book. This issue may not have been as exciting as some of the others, but of course you got to have something to set up what's going on. And this does a really good job of that. Gives us some back history on the in-laws and what potentially is going to come. It's got these two separate groups, one off trying to find the babysitter that they vanished on this obviously place with a giant. And but the book did seem light on content. I mean, it had stuff in it, but it felt very quick. It was a very quick read. Maybe that's just because it's so good. You read it and you're like, dang, there's not enough of this book. That may be the case. I am very excited that seems to be most people really like this book. So it's selling well, so we can expect it to be a saga, as it takes a very long time for it to be told. Excellent issue. If you haven't been reading this book and you're curious at all, the first trade is out there for under $10. Excellent way to get on it, and you can pick this book up and enjoy it. Of course, it's almost a month old. Number 8 is about ready to come out, so here I am reviewing books that are fairly old, I guess. I know there are people reviewing the next issues for most of these books, but that's when I get them and I want to talk about them. So, Fatale number 9. We're still in the 70s. The plans are being built in this one. This actually was a pretty good issue. I actually really enjoyed it. You starting to get to see the setup of what might be happening. Miles, the main man who's in rapture with Josephine currently, is working very hard to get Josephine into the cultists and see if they can break into the place and get the stuff they need. This one's interesting because towards the end of it, Miles is starting to understand there's something not quite right. That his reaction to things are that don't feel like his own. Stuff that normally he would be concerned about and be worried about, he doesn't seem as concerned or worried about because he's so busy being enraptured by Josephine. So he's understanding that something is going on, and he's starting to dig around. He's starting to ask more questions in a way to try and figure out what's happening. Huge setup is coming up in this thing. Looks like there's going to be some crazy chaos potentially in the next issue. There's a character in here, I believe his name is Rat. He's kind of a fixer. He can get guns and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be helping him out with kind of a raid on the cultists. He reminds me of a Hellblazer character, and not a particular Hellblazer character, but he almost feels like somebody that I've read in a Hellblazer character that'd be kind of a, you know, somebody that John Constantine knows offhandedly and whatnot and uses in some sense or another. It's kind of interesting that it just had that kind of a feel to it. I think the next issue, issue 10, is the final of the 70s story arc. Was going to be where I was going to quit reading this thing in singles, but my understanding is after that, the next story arc, as it were, really is going to be a bunch of single issue stories. So if they're going to tell me a single story and a single issue, I'll probably stay on board through that and whatnot. But actually this was a pretty enjoyable issue as a whole. I've actually liked the 70s era more than some of the others. So yeah, so this is still pretty enjoyable. Even though the last review, of course, I said I was pretty much saying that I didn't like the pacing and I was done with it, probably. Now I'm back on board again. So hit and miss, I guess. I like it enough that I want to give it the opportunity to do something. That's why I'm still 9 issues in, still getting it. And lastly, I am going to talk about Bedlam #1, book that a lot of people have talked about, and I think a lot of people thought it was really good, really interesting. Some confusion on what's going on in it. I've read about this book probably 6-9 months ago. Nick Spencer was originally talking about this book and whatnot. First and foremost, the dollar value of this thing is quite outstanding. It's a $350 book, and you've got, I don't know, there was 70-some pages in it, I think, or something like that. So that alone is outstanding, unless it's awful. It wasn't an awful issue. I think it's really interesting. You've got this character, Matter Red, who terrorized this town, was a mass murderer, obviously crazy person and whatnot. We have these kind of flashbacks that are basically completely in grays of Matter Red, and then we have what I'm assuming is current timeline that's still muted colors but actually has a color to it, of this character who, when he looks at himself in the mirror, he sees Matter Red. And obviously, just from his own internal dialogue and his mantra he keeps telling himself, I am not, I am not the man today that I was yesterday, kind of mantra. That to me seems pretty obvious that he is Matter Red, or was Matter Red at one point, and he's medicated and has gone through some sort of therapy to where he is no longer Matter Red. This book leads us through this situation where Matter Red basically tries goading the law enforcement into killing him, or the crowd, or anybody. Seemingly his death is faked by somebody who has then, towards the end of the book, locked Matter Red into a chair. And it looks like potentially, my guess is, by trying to put the two together in my head, they put him through some sort of therapy. They kind of went in the fact they're going to clean his brain out. And once his brain is cleaned out, he won't have to worry about Matter Red anymore. So my assuming is this main character here was Matter Red at one point. He has been rehabilitated in some sense. Maybe rehabilitated like Clockwork Orange. I mean, because the characters are just really sinister and whatnot, and at the end of the Clockwork Orange, they do try rehabilitating the character in that. Maybe there's some sort of something like that going on here. At any rate, this character, who I believe was once Matter Red, is now thinking he's going to help the police department out with a serial killer who's killing senior citizens. But of course, our main character, obviously still mentally unstable. He's still a strange person. There's a great sequence of him trying to buy a phone in this, trying to buy a mobile phone so he can call the police department and give them some vital information and whatnot. And it just, there's some great stuff in it. You know, the art so far is really good. Riley Rosmo did the artwork on Debris, and if you've watched my other No Case videos, of course, I tore the last issue of Debris apart because he kind of phoned it in there and somebody else finished the work off and it looked pretty awful. But here, I like it. It's gritty. It works for the subject matter because it's brutal. This Matter-Red person is vicious. He slits children's throats in it. It is, but really interesting. I'm curious to see how the two mesh together, because my understanding of this story is it's a story about a guy who was a massive mass murderer, serial killer, I'm assuming Matter-Red, has been rehabilitated in some sense, and then he gets roped back in by the police department to help them solve more serial mass murderers, and how fractured the character is, and how does he come to grips with the two, and does that slowly pull him back into the monster that he once was, if he starts getting into the head of the monster he once was. Interesting. It's grim, kind of gory, definitely violent. I'm curious about issue 2. As I'm reviewing this, issue 2 is already out. I've seen at least one review that did not like it. So I'm now extra eager to get it just to see if I liked it or what's going on in it. But anyway, that's Bedlam with a tagline, "Is evil just something you are or something you do?" Anyway, that's it for this time. I'm going to keep it short, just a 3. I'll probably have another 3 here fairly quickly, maybe even over the weekend if I get it recorded and whatnot. That's it, and I hope everybody out there is at least checking out a few No Capes comics along with their superhero comics. Take it easy, everybody.